Thanks for coming to our panel. Today we're going to be talking about software testing in the golden age of quality assurance. So Phil contacted me. He's like, hey, would you like to do a panel? I'm like, sure, I'll do a panel. Never done a panel before. The concept we wanted to work around is, what does testing look like right now, and where is testing going? And as I was starting to think about that, I thought, well, you know, we really are in the golden age of quality assurance. We have more tools today, more power today, more interesting things that are going on around testing and in the testing sphere than we have ever had before. And we are absolutely poised for 2020, Pacific Northwest Conference, to go straight into the future and just barrel right through a lot of the boundaries and things that we've looked at before. So I've got today with me a couple of wonderful, wonderful humans. I don't think I said it, but my name's Jenny Bramble. I'm a software test creature at Willow Tree. One of the things that I like to do with my life is conference speaking. I also have the lovely Dr. Carol Oliver. She has a BS in computer science from Stanford University and a PhD in computer science from Florida Institute of Technology. Her academic research examined the gap between academia's perception that testing tools were sufficient for the needs of practitioners versus the practitioners' experience reports that automated testing tools were failing them. We've also got Nermina, who works with the Pokemon Company, and I forgot to get a bio from her, so could you say a few words?
Yeah, in the case if you didn't get my name, it's Nermina. Thank you for a reminder, friendly reminder throughout the day, so thank you, Mom. I am originally from Bosnia, have been 20 years into testing, working for the Pokemon Company International. I speak about 11 languages. I learned English by myself, so bear with me. I still have an accent, so testing is my middle name, and I also lead Women in Technology group at the Pokemon Company.
Thank you. And, oh, please do clap for her. She's wonderful. And last but not least, we've got Mallory, who is a quality engineer at Pendo. She is absolutely passionate about diversity and inclusion at work and was one of the driving forces behind the inception of affinity groups at Pendo. What's super interesting to me about Mallory is that she is from about 45 minutes away from where I live, and we haven't met before today.
And I didn't have a keynote speaker help you all remember my name, so I'm going to help you. Mal is bad in different languages, and Lori is a type of parrot. So bad parrot, Mallory.
Oh my gosh. Y'all are the most wonderful thing, and I just love you all. Okay, so we're going to start out with a couple of questions that I had prepared, and then we're going to take some questions for the audience if y'all have anything you'd like to ask us. So, first thing I want to say is, or ask, is, sorry, I have a list, I promise. One of the major things that we've talked about as a quality assurance group and as testers in general is shifting left, shifting right, shifting up, shifting down. So the question I'd like to pose to the panel is, how are we moving around the software development lifecycle right now, and what does it look like for us to move in other directions? Nermina, you want to start?
Being a test engineer, being now test manager, I think it evolved, the role evolved heavily, and I think it leaps into other disciplines, it leaps into project management, it leaps into product ownership. Testers are nowadays being a scrum masters, product owners, all jack of all trades basically, while not forgetting the base, home base duties. I'm really proud that 10 years ago, many companies actually did not recognize test as the importance of a test as discipline, the importance of test engineers inside. You know, the developers were cool, we were not cool.
Cool.
And they were not considering quality. Quality was not part of the culture at all. I'm very pleased to recognize that many companies are seeing a need to introduce testers right from the beginning. So from the literally project kickoff meetings, we are involved. The meetings cannot start without us being present in the room. So I think it should be a must, a mandatory requirement for all the projects, all the products moving forward.
Sounds wonderful. My personal
hold it
experience
just a little
hasn't
bit more.
been quite that rosy in success, but let's go for it. I'm not sure I have anything to add. You just handed me the mic.
Didn't mean to. So I agree. I think in the beginning of my career, I was definitely siloed, and quality was more of an afterthought than involved from the beginning of a project. And I think some of it has to do with the shift of a lot of companies going more agile, getting started with quality from the very beginning in design and grooming meetings. I think the biggest shift I've noticed is that quality is more involved in UX improvements because you're in the product so much, and design really, for me, comes to my team and will ask, well, this feels weird to me, what do you think? So that's the biggest shift I've noticed.
That is a really great point about getting getting QA involved in the different things. Because if there's one thing that quality assurance and testers do, it's hold the model of the system in our minds. We definitely have to act as a stand-in for the users in a lot of ways. And having design recognize that is absolutely gorgeous. The next question I'd like to pose to my lovely, lovely panelists: what methodologies are more prominent now than you feel like they have been in the past? Is there a shift you've seen over your career of different styles of testing? It's almost like she did her
actually say
PhD
something
on
to
this.
that. So when I started as a tester, I found myself working with some people who had some ideas that testers should not see the code. So one of the things that I'm finding that has shifted dramatically in the last decade is that there's a lot more support for testers working with the code, not just seeing it and doing it and extending it. And I think that's going to be more important going forward. If you came to my talk or read my paper and the conference materials, you'll see that I'm suggesting that we need some new testing tools to handle mobile and IoT environmental variability. And at the moment, the only technologies I know of that will address that are code-based and rich simulation environments. And we've got to write code and work with code to do that. So I think that's a place we're going in the future. And I think it's more possible that people will support that now.
What do you think those new tools might look like? Sorry, I didn't make your talk.
I think the gist of my talk yesterday was that it's a large, complex space, and we need to start talking about it so we start building a variety of them. I have one that I've imagined. I'd kind of like to combine integration testing with compiler knowledge. It knows how to put all the code together, and set it up so that we can say, okay, I have this arbitrary path through this code base I want to run, and start here, run there, expect this sensor data while you're running on that. Do this for 8 hours, and let me monitor the data and tell me what happens at the end. Wow. And I believe we can get there, but that's going to be a little complicated. And maybe there will be some much simpler ideas. I tried to put together something for my dissertation that would take Android GUI XML files and just lay them out on the screen, and then vary the screen size, dimensions and characteristics, and give you alerts when elements were too close together or too far apart and things like that. And Android isn't really constructed under the scene to make that possible. So that was kind of interesting too. But we've got a whole field worth of people with great imaginations. There've got to be a bunch of other ideas.
That's really true. There is so much creativity in this field. It is amazing.
So as far as testing tools go, there are new open source frameworks for automation always being dreamt up. And I think another tool is kind of a plug to my company, but Pendo is a product experience platform. It gathers analytics on how users are using our customers' products, and it allows you to see the most common paths that user takes. So I think using a tool like Pendo, I know for us, helps us greatly improve test coverage for popular paths. And that's just one example of the many things that we used Pendo for at Pendo. But I think it's a really valuable tool, and a lot of we sell to product managers and customer success managers mostly, but quality can really see some value out of it as well.
That's incredible. It's so great to know that there's something out on the market today that can fill in some of these gaps.
I would like to add a few more aspects. I believe the future trends of testing have to absolutely be focused on security testing, compliance testing, knowing that many companies are building the products that require PCI compliance, GDPR, anything. Everybody who has a global product will absolutely have to look into that. Security in itself is new. Security test engineers are very hot on the market, and those are different skill sets that one needs to acquire in order to be successful at its job. It's also a highly paid job, by the way.
Hear that, y'all? Security testing.
Yeah, I have 2 job openings, just FYI. Another aspect is how do you scale? We are in the mobile games industry, and we need to support 2 million logins a day of users. So how do we build an applications that are sustaining and be able to scale for 4 million logins and user profiles, if you will? So that's another thing. How do we test with the scale in mind? I wanted to mention one more thing. Performance also. So how do you test for performance? In many cases, with a quick iteration, I think performance is long forgotten. So building a rich data sets that can simulate that is also important. Also, another aspect I wanted to say, I know we are all heading into AI type of a future, which is scary. Are we going to have jobs 10 years from now? I don't know. I still think the human intervention will be required. The usability aspect of it. What does it mean to us? What's usable to us? It's very touchy-feely. So it will be difficult to teach machine as to what's of value to us. That's my take. Thank you.
Can we step back to the security thing for a minute? You talked about security testing being something that we're going to be moving towards. What sort of skill sets would you look for in a security tester? Is it a tool set? Is it skills? What makes somebody valuable in that way?
That's an excellent question. I'm still learning. Security testing really starts with the code review. For example, there are so many gates that there is no silver bullet for that. And that engineer kind of has to understand how they build their skill sets along the way. So you have to be technical enough to do a code review. If you're doing encryption check, making sure that the developer you're working with is doing that encryption. So you have to have some sort of development background, if you will. Another things that the security engineer needs to do and acquire are definitely, there are certificates, security certificates. I forgot, there is one called OSCPE or something. And it's really a tough one to pass. You need to be able, like within 24 hours, to hack a site or something.
Oh my.
So they walk you through that process. So you need to be able to do penetration testing. Pen testing is a hot thing. In other words, you have to be certified ethical hacker. So you're the guy or a gal that needs to be able to break your application, your site, but not with the maliciousness in your mind. So all those SQL injections, the URL spoofing, the pen testing, all of that will need to be in your arm in order to apply for the security testing role. Certifications are really tough, and right now I know many companies are looking for that. Whenever people apply, security test engineer apply, you come up, you need to be validated. Fanny mentioned a lot of security test engineers are actually learning their skills on the dark web. So just something to look for. What not to have.
Hear that, everyone? Be good.
Be good.
Or don't get caught.
Yep.
Wait, is that being recorded? Are there any questions from the audience? Anything you'd like to pose to the panel about the future of QA, QA currently? Any questions? Cool. I have a huge list, so we're going to be here for a while. So the next question I'd like to pose to my wonderful humans is about value. So one of the things that I run into a lot at my particular company is how do I show the best value to my clients and make them excited to have me on the project? So how do you show value in your current roles, or how has that changed for you in the past few years?
So I feel like I add value by continuing to move the development process along. A lot of times quality can be a bottleneck, and I try to work closely with all of my developers to ensure that I am testing early in their development process and often, so we can kind of weed out the bugs that might show up later. So testing early is one way I try to show value, and also identifying paths that would be good automation candidates, so I don't have to be a bottleneck in the future for a release or something. So that's just 2 examples.
I love this question, by the way. So developers like to develop code. They don't like to fix bugs. So you have to know what the system of value it is to developer. Like they want a new feature, they want a shiny new stuff. So the way I sell them my value is, look, if I identify this bug early on, or ideally ahead of a game, and if you review my test plans, then you'll have less bugs to fix. So, and they're like, right on. So it's all about how we sell that. Fixing bugs later on is more expensive than early on. Getting a buy-in on all the stakeholders, it's easier. It converts at the end. I always say we represent the customer. We are the testers are voice of the customer. So you convert this to some sort of bad user experience. If you can convert a bug into dollar amount, then the business will hear you. So, so the value, you need to know who your target audience is, and then you convert that value to them. You speak their language. So in many aspects, testers really need to be diplomatic stuff, if you ask me.
That's a lesson I learned the hard way.
I'll take a little different tack at this. I would say that one of the things that I most add value by is by coming up with odd ideas that the developers never thought of. I've had some of my developers in the past have said, I'm so glad you tested that. I never would have thought of doing that. Hi, that's what I do. The other thing I'm really good at is I'm really good at taking a mess that people don't understand what's going on, and not necessarily quickly, sometimes it's slow, but diving in and figuring out what's going on and surfacing later and saying, okay, this is what's happening, and these are the implications of what's going wrong at each step and why, and now we know what it is, and we can prioritize whether or not we're going to do something about it.
When you say prioritize, is that something you're directly involved in, or is that?
Have not been a decision maker on that yet.
That was good phrasing. I like it.
Provided arguments and backup evidence, and then, upper management has said whatever suited them at the time. But
that sounds like a really great way of adding value, is being able to have that discussion and being able to bring in all of these different viewpoints into the
if business-wise
conversation.
It's not the right time to fix something, at least you know what you're not fixing and what the implications are, so you're not getting surprised later.
That's extremely valuable. Great job. Oh, yes. Actually, I'm going to throw a microphone at you. This is going to be so much fun. Ready?
All right, hopefully I can. I actually caught it. Kind of building on your question, but everyone can answer. But advice for how to communicate with devs who are wonderful people, but take it personally when you find a bug in their code, and they're like really great people. They're more than happy to help you, but they don't like you find they they take bugs personally. How to deal with that? Like when they're good people, you know? But
Well, when they're bad, people yell at them. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. So I find the best way to handle that is to have a conversation. First, find the proof that it actually is an issue, or if there's not proof, just explain, this is the way I went about testing this, and this is how I understood it should work. What was your understanding, to try and find common ground, because it could be that you had completely different understandings of how it should work in the first place, and that might be why they were getting offended when you told them they were wrong, or you didn't, their code said that they were wrong. I've definitely had pushback before where it's obvious there's an issue to me, and if just providing a video and steps to reproduce aren't enough, I think also bringing in other opinions, like the product owner or the designer, depending on what the issue is, and just having a conversation amongst you all to come, again, to a common understanding. And it doesn't have to be, I'm right, you're wrong, and just be like, oh, okay, this was a productive discussion, and I'm glad we came up with a solution.
I've certainly had trouble with that in the past. What I've come to believe very strongly is that it's not us versus them. It never should be us versus them. It's us and them against the chaos of environmental and deployed conditions and things that we never expected happening in the world. So I see development focus work as a creative effort about trying to find a way to make something work, and that's really hard. Sometimes it's much harder than others. And I see testing focus work as a creative effort about trying to challenge what's been created to see if it's going to hold up about everything that's thrown against it that, no rational person would expect would happen, but does all the time. And that's a shared collaborative effort to produce successful software. I think if you can build a culture where everybody sees, okay, we're trying to achieve the same goal, just using our different expertises, that's a good way of trying to minimize the chance for somebody to feel personally offended that something went wrong, because it's never a personal statement. I've worked with great developers, and there's always things that are like, the code just doesn't handle this kind of thing. And sometimes that's because I came up with something weird. Sometimes that's because there was a gap in the requirements, and so we didn't know what it was supposed to do. Sometimes it was a requirement was ambiguous, and we each had different valid interpretations, and it takes 3 levels of senior management meeting to figure out what it is they really want. And sometimes there are direct conflicts and all sorts of things. There's lots of reasons, but it's all about surfacing those opportunities to make the product the most successful possible.
Did that answer your question? Oh, did you have a little bit more?
On top of all of that, to deep dive a little bit further, is it priority 1 or priority 2 bug? So it's not anymore the question of whether it's bug or not, but what priority. I've had those discussions many, many times. One tool that really helps is defining the priorities and severities even early on and try to abide by that. But literally, in many cases, you need to pick your battles. If it's a data loss, if something is very severe, affects the customer, does not have a workaround, I am very strict. No question. It's a bug, it's severe, I propagate to everybody, this is a no-go for me. If it's a small little text typo or something, it is ugly, but it might be, lower priority, and we can negotiate and fix it in different sprints. So in many cases, a test needs to have an educational and teaching role as well. You teach these developers who are our partners, basically, and the closer we are working with them, we are educating them what the customer sees and what's of value.
And expanding on that, as the bug reports are clear about what the impact is on real people, if we let this stand, will be what our users will experience from it. That can be very powerful. if a colleague years ago told me about a bug that one of his testers was standing firm on, that basically said, you know, I can't let this out because I can't reliably draw a triangle if one corner of the triangle is in Alaska and the other corner of the triangle is in Peru and the third one is over in Moscow. And he said, there are no printers that are that big. We'll let that one go.
And I kind of disagree with the comment about if it's a simple text change, let it go, because the amount of time that it takes for me to open a ticket and argue that it should be fixed when you're already in the code, like, that's just a no-go for me. So I would block on something as simple as that, for sure. But that's just how I work personally.
I think part of it is definitely a cultural thing and how your team has agreed to work together. Do you feel like that answers your question?
Yeah, I think that does give me some extra tools in my toolbox, certainly.
Fantastic.
I actually
even have
wanted
to
to
throw
add
it.
something to what the answers were, because I'm familiar with the question. So first of all, I try to make sure that I get to know the people I work with. If they know who I am and they know that I'm not generally an a-hole, it's probably much easier to file a bug and say, oh, look, this, doesn't work the way it's understood. And secondly, I think in conversations, I often point out that we should be popping champagne corks when we find bugs, because anything we find whilst we make the software is something that the customer won't find. And that's good for all of us. The other thing I wanted to add to something that you were talking about earlier is I think QA people bring a lot more value than just testing. I can't tell you how often I find gaps in requirements, as you say, or where very complicated business rules can be interpreted in many different ways. And it's really important that people understand that QA engineers bring a lot more to the table than just testing.
I agree with that. We definitely bring a ton of skills in, like looking at requirements, looking at design, looking at all that. Did I see another hand go up? Oh, I saw him first. I would just gently pass it down. Oh no, we're not doing gentle, are we?
I was going to show off and catch with one hand, but she's right next to me.
I'm sure the gentleman behind you appreciates it.
When you're talking about, whether or not to go to prod or not, and it's on the same topic, how does your company treat the whole, it's a regression bug, whether, it's already on prod, don't worry about it, it's been there for 5 weeks, we don't really need to fix that yet? And this, I guess, you, all three of you, if you want to answer.
My least favorite response is, well, this exists on master. I'm like, well, that might be true, but can we still fix it? So we have two different classifications. We have bugs that exist in production, and then defects are issues that are found either during development or once we've gone to our staging environment. So generally, if we find a defect, we block the release and fix it unless it really is something that's not going to be easily discoverable. If it's, something really broken and obvious, we'll fix it. But in general, defects get fixed right away, and bugs, we go through the normal priority process. How severe is it? How many customers are being affected? Do we have angry customers reporting it? So visibility is a big part of that for us.
Very similar. Basically, we testers, even they say it exists in production, I think I can live by just for one sprint, and then I have itchy feet. I'm like, so how about that bug? Remember? It's on us to be more scientific. In other words, we have to do our homework, prepare a report. If we really do care or feel strongly about the bug, identify how many users are impacted, work with customer support or customer service, dig down through the logs, do some analytics pieces, and basically present that and say, look, this bug may not be important to you, but here's the data. Let's do the data-driven decisions. And I always go back to science for that, and then see how the users respond to it, as you mentioned, like read the blogs and all of that, and eventually advocate for customers, and eventually that bug makes it into one of the sprints. But it's really persistence that we are playing with here.
So I've been in academia for 8 years, and I'm currently between commitments. When I left industry to go to school, Agile was starting to take over the world, and so instead of having a bug out in prod that you're like, well, we'll get to this when we come back to this product in another year and a half, we were expecting to have another release coming pretty soon. So, oh, it's in prod, it's okay, seems like it shouldn't be as valid an argument now. Because there's so much infrastructure in place to make it possible to do little releases to fix minor or missed things. Not everything's going to be worth that overhead if that cycle isn't going all the time. But sometimes it's how much is it annoying the customers. Sometimes it's, so what's the impact if somebody did find this? And, the canonical example there is the security problems, but it could be some other things too. So if you can assess what the impact is going to be and make a good persuasive story about that, then you can say, hey, no, this really deserves to be prioritized for a fix, even though it's going to take a couple of hours in what we're doing. Or if it's not really that important, then you say, okay, well, let's at least throw it in the backlog and it'll be there and we'll get to it sometime, right?
What a great point about agile cadence versus waterfall cadence. Did that answer your question pretty well?
I started daydreaming partway through, so if you could just repeat. Yes, I did.
All right, I saw a couple other hands. Oh, heavens. Please don't hurt anybody with that.
Hello. Speaking of the golden age of quality, it is my experience in QA that it's a very numbers-driven game. It's all about how many test cases you can produce, how many runs you can do, how much code coverage do you have, versus just quality testing and testing smart. What are your experiences in the industry with this, and do you think it's changing?
Y'all, I just gave a presentation on this. It was wonderful.
Do you want to answer?
Oh my gosh, step out of the moderator role? What? So my experience there is that a numbers-driven quality assurance game is a terrible game to play because the numbers don't mean anything. They are all gameable, they are all twistable, and you get what you measure. If you're measuring number of defects found, you're going to find a lot of defects, quote unquote. The thing that I propose that we measure instead is the morale of the team, because morale creates an ecosystem in which quality can thrive. I've seen so many projects be bad projects because there's not enough test cases, there's too many test cases, there's too many bugs. What does too many bugs even mean? I mean, maybe we're getting too drunk because we're popping too many champagne corks when we find them. But your metrics shouldn't be something that are used as a weapon to punish people. And that has been my experience in the past. And I believe that if we want to have a healthy test team and healthy quality assurance teams, we will move away from numbers-driven games and into a more morale-driven, soft skills-driven game.
And do you see this changing as well? Because my experience is that if you're not on the inside of QA, in a lot of the business side of the world, it's all about numbers, right?
Unfortunately, we live in a world in which numbers are king. I think we're going to continue to see a numbers game for at least a few more years. I think we are going to start moving away from it as we start to realize that it is a terrible way to judge humanity.
I agree. Thank you.
Do you have anyone else want to chime in?
We have a backlog. So I just happen to have the mic first. when I was last practicing, I struggled to try to communicate to some of my managers, particularly those who had no background in testing, what it was that I could be contributing. And a lot of what they were demanding from me was informed by what was being passed around as best practices, standards, et cetera. And I think that's where a lot of those numbers things come from. And 100% automation, and we need more of this, and we need more of that. And one of the things I came up with, and it's in my conference paper, is I came up with it while I was doing my grad school work, is what I call the release readiness levels framework. And it talks about the different types of testing, the different degrees of depth of information that it is possible for testers to go after. And it lets me say, okay, so you've been telling me that I need to do this and this and this and spend all my time doing these things. And these things are giving me level 1 and level 2 testing. And I could be doing 3, 4, and 5, which would give us much greater depth and insight and different kinds of information. And I think this kind of information is valuable. What do you think? So I think if we can change the conversation from which arbitrarily CEO-approved standard that is popular on the golf course is in vogue to what information we could be delivering, that we might see a rebalancing of what we're encouraged and supported to do.
So I don't know if this is going to directly answer your question, but I'm going to share anyways. When I first started in my career, I spent so much time writing test cases and maintaining them. And now in my current role, I pretty much don't write test cases at all. The test plan is understanding the acceptance criteria and agreeing on it as a team. And basically going into it with the mindset of the user and just trying to weed out any bugs. We still play a numbers game with bugs and defects because that's what our executive team cares about. And I don't think that hurts the morale of our team. I think it makes us want to be better because we want to, at the end of the week, say that no, 0 customer bugs were reported. So I guess I'm in favor of the numbers game, but I think I'm more in favor of it now because I don't have to worry about the number of test cases I'm writing to go with that. So, yeah.
We have about 30 seconds left.
It's a comment that follow on the comments that's just made. I mean, the theme for the year for this conference is culture of quality. It's about culture. So I think to some extent, whether you're talking about the numbers game or other aspects, you're talking about the impact to organizational culture and to some extent actually national culture. I think the numbers game is very much a Western-centric view of quality. I don't think it's really that way in certain other cultures. Asian culture, East Asian culture, Chinese culture in particular, I'm more familiar with since I'm Chinese. I think, there's one aspect of globalization that is interestingly biased toward Western metrics, and when it comes to software quality, I think usability is a good example where the numbers game really doesn't work. Just a thought.
That is a really amazing comment and brings in a lot of really great points about how our culture of quality is very much our culture of quality. And there's a lot of assumptions we can't make about the global culture of quality. So thank you for that. That was really gorgeous. We are actually out of time. If y'all have any more comments that you'd like to make, the panelists and I will be available unless we all go hide in a room together. Please don't forget to do your evaluations on the app. You can download the app super quickly. You don't have to log in. Do it, delete it. We're good.
Just want to point out, all the questions are in my live blog, so if anybody wants to keep the
Yes.
conversation going, get it up in the comments. Maybe we can do something with it.
Absolutely. Michael has a live blog. It's the blog is mkltesthead.com. go to his blog, find the post, comment on it. We would love to continue this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists.